Hello, my name is Chris Andre, and I work in the Office of Generic Drugs and the Office of Research and Standards. And I'm going to talk today about the GDUFA II Pre-ANDA program for complex products. The things I'm going to cover are an introduction to the pre-ANDA meeting program, how to submit a meeting request through the portal, the pre-ANDA process, and the pre-ANDA meeting request and package contents. So the goal of the pre-ANDA program, which was established in GDUFA II, is to clarify regulatory expectations for prospective applicants early in product development, to assist applicants to develop more complete submissions, to promote a more efficient and effective ANDA assessment process, and to reduce the number of review cycles required to obtain an ANDA approval, particularly for complex products. I think the overall goal is to use these tools to reduce the number of review cycles. There are two pre-ANDA meeting types, and these pre-ANDA meetings can accelerate the access to generics of complex products because you're engaging early with the FDA and thereby having a better submission. One of the meeting types is a pre-ANDA product development meeting, often abbreviated as PDEV. This is an early engagement in your individual product development program. The second type of meeting is a pre-submission meeting, often called the P-sub. This is when you're ready to or close to submitting your application. So during the life cycle of the pre-ANDA meeting, there's several goal dates. The first goal date is that within 14 days, the FDA will respond to your request and grant or deny the meeting. If your meeting is granted, we will offer the meeting date within 120 calendar days of granting the request. The next date is 5 days before the meeting. You will receive preliminary written comments on your questions from FDA. And then the last portion of the process is meeting minutes will be sent 30 days after the meeting is over. The product development meetings, they're meant to be meetings involving the scientific exchange to discuss specific issues or questions. These might be things such as a novel proposed study design, an alternative bioequivalence approach, or additional study expectations. FDA will provide targeted advice regarding an ongoing ANDA development program. And what that means is we're looking for your meeting request to be related to a particular product that you are currently developing, not a general question that crosses a broad topic. Pre-submission meetings, which are different than the product development meetings, are meant to discuss and explain the format and content of your ANDA that you're getting ready to submit. So applicants can obtain advice that will enable efficient review and improve the chance of a first cycle approval. And pre-submission meetings will not include substantial review of summary data or full study reports. That's what a product development meeting is for. ANDA are expected to be submitted within 6 to 12 months if you're looking for a time frame of when you might have a pre-submission meeting. The pre-ANDA meeting decision is based on many things. And if we want to grant one, if we're able to grant one, these are the qualifications that must be met. The meeting concerns development of a complex product for which the FDA has not issued a product-specific guidance. Sometimes those are called PSGs, and those are available for public view, or proposes an alternative equivalence evaluation for a complex product for which FDA has issued a product-specific guidance. So one is for a case where we don't have the guidance. And the other is a case where we do have a guidance, but you're proposing an alternative bioequivalence evaluation or some other thing. The prospective applicant submits a complete meeting package, including a data package and specific proposals. So the data package and the proposals do not need to be separate. This can all be a single document that flows and submitted as one. A controlled correspondence response would not adequately address the prospective applicant's question. So in that case, we would grant a meeting, and a product development meeting would significantly improve ANDA assessment efficiency. So these decisions also can be made by granted if the meeting concerns complex product development issues that where the FDA has developed a product-specific guidance and the prospective ANDA applicant is not proposing an alternative equivalence evaluation, depending on available resources, if the following are met. The prospective applicant submits a complete meeting package, including data and proposals. The control correspondence response would not adequately address your questions, or a product development meeting would significantly improve ANDA assessment efficiency. So how do you submit your meetings? We have something called the CEDAR Direct Next Gen Collaboration Portal, which, as you might imagine, is quite a mouthful, and it's commonly called the portal. This portal is used for submitting pre-ANDA meeting requests for either product development or pre-submission meetings for complex generic drug products. It's also used to submit controlled correspondence. In order to submit a meeting request, you will need a pre-assigned application number. This application number stays with your meeting package and with your submission throughout the cycle of your ANDA. You will need a U.S. agent if you are a non-U.S. applicant. Pre-ANDA product development meetings and pre-submission meetings are both submitted through the portal. In order to begin, if you haven't done a portal submission before, is that once you're on the website, click Request a Login. Choose your event, which in this case we're discussing pre-ANDA meetings, and you can register as either a U.S. agent or the applicant, depending on what's appropriate. Enter the required information. Once approved, you will receive your username and temporary password. One thing to note is login requests will not be processed until you verify your email. Just a couple more facts about the login. If your organization doesn't appear when you do a search, you can enter it manually. Also, if you don't have a DUNS number or you don't know what that is, you can use the 9-digit code as 9999, etc. And if you have issues still, you can contact the EDM support team, and they will help you through your issues in order to get a login in an account. So for U.S. agents, if you are submitting as a U.S. agent, fill in your applicant's information. Search for application information or enter manually. Provide the applicant contact information. If you are the applicant with no U.S. agent, proceed to attach a document and do not enter yourself as a U.S. agent. So now that you have a login that's been created, you want to create a new request. And when you click on create a new request, it'll request some information from you, which you should enter a pre-assignment number, as I mentioned earlier, what type of meeting request you're submitting, and what the reference listed drug, often abbreviated as RLD, is. So submitting your meeting request, before you submit your meeting request, you have the option of saving your draft request. You can come back to it later and continue where you left off. One thing I always like to point out is that the FDA cannot see your saved meeting request. You can delete a meeting request if you have not yet submitted it. First, in order to submit, you will be asked to review for accuracy and then submit to FDA. You will receive a confirmation message and email once you have submitted your request. We often talk about two-way communication when referring to the portal. And what this really means is that the portal has the ability to where you can submit and receive documents through your account with an email notification. So if we submit a response to you, you will get an email notification to go to the portal and you can see your documents there. So the advantage of this is all your documents and correspondence are in one place. Adding your documents. You must add a meeting package in order to proceed. You can add more than one document if you wish, for example, a cover letter and a meeting package. The meeting package, though, is due at the time of request for a meeting. In the cover letter, you do not need to repeat the information that is going into the meeting package. It can be a fairly short document if you wish to add one. Multiple formats are allowed. They're listed below. Macros are not allowed, and files may not exceed 45 megabytes. So the first thing we do when we get the meeting request is we do a grant-deny assessment. So are we going to grant the meeting or are we going to deny it? And this has a goal date of 14 days for us to respond to the request of whether we're going to grant or deny your meeting. If your meeting request is denied, FDA will provide information to the applicant on a path forward. If a meeting is granted, the FDA will offer a meeting date within 120 calendar days of granting the request. That date is often closer to the end of the 120 days. This is just a figure that outlines the procedure in a kind of a pictorial fashion. And it essentially says the same thing. We think of it in 3 phases. Phase 1 is the grant deny part, which is 14 days. Then phase 2 is the review period while we have our folks reviewing what you submitted. And then phase 3 is the 30 days after your meeting where we're working on the meeting minutes. The meeting package format is important. Initially, you can refer to the draft guidance for formal meetings between FDA and ANDA applicants of complex products under GDUFA guidance for industry. Number your questions clearly and group them by discipline. For example, bioequivalence questions would all be together. The CMC questions would all be together. But it doesn't matter what order they are in the meeting package as long as they're just grouped by type. Also, minimize the use of sub-questions with A, B, C, or Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and keep it just a standard numbering system. So the meeting package content for product development meetings should provide clear and specific questions about your development program. Include data supporting the proposed new approach that may include characterization of the RLD and ANDA products, results from pilot studies, comparisons of the proposed approach to that currently recommended by FDA, quantitative analysis that supports your approach. For pre-submission meetings, which are different type of meetings than the product development, you want to outline the unique, novel, or complex aspects of your upcoming submissions that you will present at the meeting. If you have specific questions, provide appropriate background material and data related to those questions. When we're doing our meeting request evaluation, the assessment team evaluates the request, and the assessment team consists of people in OGD and people in OPQ, and they each separately triage the meeting requests when they come in and make their own determination as to whether they would grant or deny. If either party wants to grant, the meeting is granted. If both parties deny, then it's denied. ODD and OPQ coordinate to provide a unified response, whether that be the preliminary response or the meeting minutes or any other aspect of the project. The assessment team reviews the product details, contents, and submitted questions in the meeting package, and then determines whether the meeting is granted or denied. So after that, a letter will be with the grant or deny decision will be sent to you through the portal. The meeting denied letter will complete your project, but you will be advised on the next step, for example, submit a control correspondence instead, on how to get feedback from the FDA on your question. If your meeting was granted, we typically grant them as face-to-face meetings, though you can request a written response or a teleconference. Obviously, in these times right now, we are doing meetings by teleconference, but as soon as we're able to go back to normal, we'll be able to do face-to-face meetings. We also have the ability to do information requests after we've gotten your package and we've agreed to do a meeting. And these IRs are sent to you through the portal, and we can send to you anytime during the process, but we really try to strive to send it early in the process to give you time to gather what we've asked for and us time to review. The applicant responds to the IR through the portal under the same event ID, not as a new meeting request. This is very important. Sometimes we have applicants that make a new meeting request as if they're submitting another meeting and then add their documents there. We don't want that to happen, so we want you to use the same ID event for a single project. So after we review and we put together our potential responses, we send out the preliminary responses. So those are sent out for face-to-face meetings and teleconferences, and they're also sent through the portal approximately 5 days before your scheduled meeting. This is your opportunity to focus your meeting for clarification, which is why we send them to you ahead of time. You have the option to submit some presentation materials, to submit a revised agenda on what exactly you'd like to have clarified or to discuss further, and you submit these through the portal. Do not submit any of these documents after you've received your preliminary response. I would say use this time wisely and really think about the specific questions that you have regarding your preliminary responses from us and how you want to talk about it. And remember that no new material or no new data will be accepted and discussed at the meeting. You can also cancel your meeting if you feel the preliminary responses adequately address your questions. On the day of the meeting, the prospective ANDA applicant submits meeting slides an agenda via the portal approximately 48 hours before, as we discussed, and meetings are typically 1 hour if they're either teleconference or face-to-face. Agenda should be focused on clarification or further discussion around the preliminary written comments. Meeting participants discuss data, questions, and the responses provided to assist them in their prospective ANDA applicant's complex product development program. One thing I'd like to point out again is that FDA cannot review new material presented at the meeting for the first time. After the meeting, you have the ability to submit a post-meeting comments through the portal. We'd like that to happen within 7 days of the meeting. The FDA will send the final meeting minutes through the portal to you within 30 days of the meeting. This completes the meeting request. So I want to change gears a little and mention a little bit about some common reasons for denial. We see incomplete meeting packages. You are not a complex product and don't qualify for the program. You've chosen the wrong meeting type, where perhaps you think you're a P-sub meeting, but you're really more in the product development space. You should have submitted a control correspondence rather than a meeting request. And a PSG is available and you are not asking for an alternative bioequivalence route. So again, if you're trying to look at that, what type of meeting you are you a pre-submission meeting or a product development meeting? We'll say product development meetings are for discussion of the specific scientific issues, including proposed study design, alternative approach, and additional study expectations. The pre-submission meetings, which are usually 6 to 12 months before submission, means you are essentially ready to submit your application, you have your stability batches started, and you want to discuss the format and content of your ANDA. So it's not a filing review. I would also like to mention that if you had a product development meeting, you're not required to have a pre-submission meeting. Another thing that people think about when they're wanting feedback from the FDA is, am I a control correspondence or a meeting? Standard controls correspondence, we often refer to them as just controls, are reviewed in 60 days. And the guidance, clarification, and rapid input into development programs is what they're used for. Complex controls are reviewed in 120 days. These controls often require clinical input, meaning perhaps protocols for safety determination letters, or an alternate BE approach, but within the same class. The complex control expands what we can consider via the control process. Meetings are best for multidisciplinary questions, and controls are best for single questions or a small group of closely related questions. Here I just put a few examples of some unclear questions. You can see the theme as I read them. Is my PK study acceptable? So this is a very broad question, and instead you want to identify the point of uncertainty and ask a specific question. Is my specification acceptable? Might be another question you're thinking about. Instead, ask a specific question about this complex product and your understanding of how you will control the CQA of your product. The third one I have here listed is do not submit a protocol and ask us to review it. Instead, submit specific questions regarding your protocol. These are two other questions that we're sometimes asked. Are product development meetings good for broad questions? The answer is no. You should provide specific questions and include the justification behind them. Should I submit my entire protocol for comment? No, again, specific questions with data and other justifications. Does anybody have any questions?
And thank you, Chris, for that great presentation. We are going to go into Q&A right now. Just a quick reminder to our participants. We have had quite a few questions come in, but if you do have any, please type them into the Q&A pod down in the lower right-hand corner. I'm going to go ahead and check in with Lisa to see if we have any questions there. Actually, I'm pretty sure that we've got Chris dialed in on a separate phone line, and we'll find out in a sec. Lisa, let's go ahead and set up a question and see if Chris is on the phone bridge and can unmute herself so she can answer the questions. Lisa, go ahead with the first question.
Thank you, Jeff. So our first question is, can we have both a pre-development and a pre-submission meeting with the agency?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can. That sounds great.
Great, perfect. So your question is, can you have both a pre-submission and a product development request in at the same time? And it depends on if it's the same product. So if it's the same product, the answer is no. But if they're different products, then yes, you can.
Okay, great. So our next question is, if they can use the electronic submission gateway with a pre-assigned ANDA number, if they're doing that, can they submit a pre-submission meeting request through the ESG and not through the portal?
So that's a good question. The answer is no. We do really prefer that people submit through the portal. It's quite easy to use, and if you do have questions, there's an email on one of the slides if you're having any difficulty, but you should be submitting your pre-ANDA meeting request through the portal.
Okay. Our next question is, the questioner communicated with the FDA through controlled correspondence for the Q1 and the Q2 assessment. And they have questions on why FDA is not considering it equivalent with the reference list of drugs. They want to know more information about what's going on before they submit the ANDA. Can they request a pre-ANDA meeting?
Yes, they can, but I would suggest when they do request a meeting that they have data, so not just a Q1, Q2 formula, or not just your proposed formula, but data and justification behind why you think that you're correct and that goes against the control. So the bottom line is, yes, you can submit a pre-ANDA meeting request, but I would recommend that you put as much information in there as you can about your product.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. So the next question for you is, if you can elaborate about the alternative approach to be granted a product development meeting for a product where a product-specific guidance is already issued.
Okay, so if a product development, a PSG, product-specific guidance, has already been published to the public, and you want to do an alternative sorry, words escaping me right now, but you want to do an alternative method of bioequivalence, then you would submit that as a meeting request. You would need, or it would be very helpful to have whatever data and justification you have, submit that with your, I mean, I know that's a continuing thing to say, so it kind of goes with everything, but put as much information as you can in your submission, in your request. Did I answer your question, or was there more to it?
I believe that's the question that they submitted, so we're going to go with that. So thank you.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So our next question is, what is the most appropriate action if the applicant disagrees with a preliminary response provided by the FDA?
So at that point, you receive that prior to your meeting, and you would develop a presentation or some explanation of what you think, why you disagree, why, and why your sort of data evidence behind that. So that's definitely one of the points of the meeting itself, and why you get the preliminary response ahead of time, so that you have a chance to see what we're sending you and then respond to it. And that there at the meeting we can have a discussion on your disagreement with our answer.
Okay, great, thank you. So our next question, it has to do with controlled correspondence. Is there actually a limit for the total number of questions that can be submitted through controlled correspondence?
No, there's not a limit in, say, the guidance, or a limit that is used by the FDA. We just use the language of only a couple of questions closely related, or one question would go to a control. But if you do have, say, 10 questions about your product, you're going to want to submit a meeting request instead. So there's no hard and rule about the number.
Okay, sounds good. This is a quick question, but when you reference 5 days, are you referring to business days or calendar days?
So everything that we're talking about today for the pre-ANDA is calendar days.
Okay.
So yes, if we sent it on a Friday, you would, need to still cut some of your time down, yeah.
Okay. So great. The next question is it possible to go with an alternative approach to a product-specific guidance?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry, is it possible what?
Is it possible to go with an alternative approach to PSG?
Yeah, of course. You may submit an alternative method. You can choose to have a pre-product development meeting about it if you are really uncertain and you want some clarification or information. But otherwise, you can also submit it in your ANDA. The same thing is going to apply there. You just need to put in a lot of justification, any justification that you might have, or data proving that your alternative method is acceptable. And then it becomes a review issue if you haven't had a meeting.
Okay. So is there, the next question is there a limit to the number of pre-ANDA development meetings for the same product?
So we get this question all the time. I know there is a line in the guidance that talks about submitting approximately 1 request per year. That is not a hard and fast rule. That's just a guideline, because usually if you need to come back with another submission, you need to provide, gather more data, do some studies perhaps or something, which is why. But there really is no limit to the number that you can request, although you can only have one at a time in, and the time between the requests, although you need to use it to your advantage, because if it's, it can, remember that they can be denied if there's not enough information in the submission.
Okay, and once again, I'm going to have to be the time ogre and jump in. Thank you so much, Chris, for both the presentation and connecting to answer the Q&A, and thanks to Lisa